The following podcast is a Good Mic Work Commentaries production. Join Greg Morgan weekly as he breaks down the action from Raw, SmackDown, NXT, AEW, and more. Full video versions of the show, along with many other wrestling discussions and reviews, can be found on the Good Mic Work Commentaries YouTube channel. Be sure to rate the show and leave a review. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome back. This is your Winged Eagle podcast for September 18th, 2021. It's going to be quite the ride on this one. It's going to be a little bit of a bumpy encounter as we have the plane ride from hell to discuss today. This is being brought up 20 years after the fact because Dark Side of the Ring ran an episode on that on Thursday, and that is going to be the big meat and potatoes part of this podcast because there was a ton of fallout from that. And wow, some of the things that came to light were pretty shocking to some, not shocking to others. Going to give you all my opinions on that, the feedback, the backlash, and the repercussions that Tommy Dreamer and Ric Flair specifically are facing over this, and just, bringing up a subject that's always been, heavily discussed in shoot interviews, and it has this kind of like, basically like a historic type of tone to it because we've heard so many stories. It's almost like, it could make a good book, basically. It's just pretty incredible stuff. So we're going to kind of get into that and some of the really incriminating stuff and really tough to listen to a little bit of that episode. And I think this was one of the ones that, maybe shocked us the most in terms of just the tone of it and how things were discussed so casually that are, pretty gnarly and pretty fucked up. So we're going to get into all of that in this episode as well as discuss last night's Rampage and SmackDown shows. Both shows were okay. Both had some decent moments on them, but nothing, earth-shattering. These aren't going to be shows of the year or anything like that, but still pretty good stuff. And next week, in AEW anyway, we are lined up with a couple of pay-per-view quality shows. They're moving Rampage to 2 hours next week as well, and we're going to get two shows, Dynamite and Rampage, 2 hours each, both from Arthur Ashe, and the cards for both are super stacked. Danielson and Adam Cole are making their in-ring debuts. CM Punk's going to get in the ring. Great tag team matches. This shit is unbelievable. So next week's going to be a lot of fun, and WWE is trying to counter that as well with a pretty solid tag match set for Monday. The Bloodline taking on The New Day. Big E was on SmackDown last night. Roman's going to Raw on Monday. What the fuck is going on? We'll talk about what that might be about here later on, as well as discuss some ratings. Pretty good numbers coming in this week for AEW. Disappointing numbers for WWE, but promising numbers for NXT, and I haven't got a look at the SmackDown numbers yet. So that's kind of what's on the menu. Plane ride from hell, SmackDown, Rampage. We'll talk Raw tomorrow and touch on last week's show with Big E winning the title. We'll discuss just a tidbit of NXT from this week and maybe touch on Dynamite as well because we were up here on Wednesday watching the whole show together, so we kind of experienced all of that together, but we'll maybe touch on a few points there. And other than that, not really much wrestling news that I jotted down that I felt worthy of getting into today, although there is some now speculation on Bray Wyatt and Paige's in-ring future in wrestling as well, so we'll talk about that. And that's kind of all I've got written down, so we're going to kind of go through it all here, hang out with you guys, answer questions in the chat, that sort of thing. Probably looking at a 90-minute or 2-hour podcast today. Also, today kicks off 3 straight days of streaming. I invite you to cruise down to the description below. I've got my links for the weekend all done. Tomorrow, we're going to do a watch-along. We're going to pick up the Sunday watch-alongs again. We're not going to do this every Sunday during the fall, but we're going to do it some Sundays. And I think because, football's back now and shit, we're not going to do it every week. But would like to do one tomorrow because we've been talking about it in recent episodes and recent watch-alongs that the 20th anniversary of Unforgiven 2001, right after 9/11 when Kurt Angle won the title from Stone Cold Steve Austin. That's coming up, so that's going to be the episode we're going to do tomorrow. And then on Monday, we're going to be up here for the Raw review. So that's today, Sunday, and Monday. All of the links are in the description below, so cruise down there. You'll see a link to tomorrow's watch-along and to Monday's Raw stream. Got all that set up already, so we are ready to rock and roll. And that Monday tag match is very, very interesting. So that's what's on tap for the rest of the weekend. It should be a lot of fun. And then, of course, next week we'll be off Tuesday, but then back Wednesday for that huge Dynamite show at Arthur Ashe, Kenny Omega versus Daniel Bryan. Holy balls. Also, MJF, Jungle Boy. We'll run through the entire card here later on, but Rampage and Dynamite both look stacked. So I think next week's not going to be the worst week ever in wrestling. Unlike this week, which after what came to light in Thursday's Dark Side of the Ring episode, yikes, maybe this wasn't one of the greatest. But we're going to bounce back next week with some pretty kick-ass wrestling, I have a feeling. And WWE isn't just going to sit back and let AEW kick ass. They're going to try to, I don't know if they'll succeed or not, they're going to try to give us a good show on Monday, and hopefully SmackDown will be a great show prior to AEW Rampage. So I think we're set up and in position to have a great week of wrestling. AEW is definitely going to come through with a card like that. It's up to WWE to see if they can do the same. Either way, should be fun finding out. Going to say hello to everybody real quick in the chat. Shoot over to the Patreon page and shout out the current patrons, and then we'll start diving into stuff. And we're going to kick things off with that very revealing Dark Side of the Ring Plane Ride from Hell episode. I was really looking forward to this one, but kind of for different reasons, because we've heard so many of these stories told before. I just kind of thought it would be an interesting episode for Dark Side of the Ring. I wasn't prepared, I don't think, to realize that there was a real victim here, multiples, and what Heidi went through was just kind of sad, and sometimes you don't take into account that there's women that have to carry this shit around their whole lives, of what just was a normal everyday occurrence to a wrestler or somebody famous. They do something, it winds up fucking somebody up and scarring them for the rest of their life. But she seems like a really strong-willed, honest, genuine person. Seems like she had just fine of a life. It's not like she was permanently traumatized or anything like that, but it has been something that she's carried with her and has never forgotten, and explained in pretty horrific detail what appears to be a completely regular occurrence every day of these people's lives back in the day, and it was pretty messed up. So we'll be talking about that in a minute, but like I said, I want to say hello to everybody in the chat and wish you guys a happy Saturday. Patty J, what the hell is Batman Day? I don't even know what that is. Is today Batman Day? I know Star Wars or Star Trek. Which one is the 4th? May 4th, Star Wars has that one. So I'm not aware of Batman Day. I don't know what September 18th signifies, because I'm a dork and I don't know anything about Batman or Superman or anything. But Patty J, thank you for the $2. Appreciate it, and good to see you in here. Red Raven, Legendary Ben, and Sam, and Tatanani. Steven Scott is in here as well with $5. Thank you so much, dude. Hey, good mic work. Today is my birthday, and about Dark Side of the Ring episode, does this affect Charlotte too as well? I hope not. Happy birthday, man. Happy birthday. Glad you were able to spend it here with us today. In terms of, we're going to kind of get into all that, but in terms of how it would affect Charlotte, I would say no, based on some other second-generation wrestlers that are in the company that have had fathers that WWE has wanted to distance themselves from. Tamina comes to mind. Tamina hasn't exactly been pushed to Charlotte's level, but she's been given a job for 10-plus years, and that's not so bad either. So with Charlotte, I would say probably not, although they might pull back just a touch, with the Flair legacy thing, maybe just kind of casually calling her Charlotte more often. Not dropping Flair completely, but just kind of going by Charlotte, and maybe a few less references to her dad, even though nobody's going to ever forget who she is. Maybe just hammering that home into the audience's head 67 times per night might be something they won't want to be doing in the future. But in terms of Charlotte's pushes, probably not. They've already spent and invested too much on her. Charlotte herself, from what we understand, is a very well-behaved, respectful professional, so why should she have to pay for her father's crimes? But a lot of fans feel like she got pushed because of her dad, so maybe fans will feel she would get de-pushed because of her dad. But I would like to hope that nothing that Ric Flair does would have any effect on Charlotte's career at all, because she's not the one doing that shit. He is. So wouldn't want to see that trickle down into anybody, especially when they had nothing to do with it. But I don't know. This is WWE. We're talking about Scott, and anything's possible. No, Laura, good to see you. Charlie, J. Lambo, Deshaun Robinson in the house. HTK, good to see you. The Plane Ride from Hell is very well known from shoot interviews. I agree completely. I am a recovering shoot interview junkie. I used to be obsessed with shoot interviews. I've got one of the most beautiful shoot interview collections you've ever seen. Barry MK, if you're here, you can vouch for that. So I used to watch those things tirelessly, over and over in some cases. And then when podcast became a thing, podcast really kind of took over shoot interviews, and great DVDs and presentations and productions like we used to get from kayfabe commentaries, they kind of got muscled out sort of for the free podcasts. So prior to podcast, I was listening to stories about the plane ride from hell all the time. And they were always very interesting and a lot of times very entertaining, but almost, very jaw-dropping as well. Just the behavior can get to that degree, but they've never really gone into the fact that, sexual assaults took place. To us, it always just sounded like a plane full of wrestlers acting like morons when really they were doing a little bit more than that. So it's unbelievable the shit people used to do back then. Crazy, man. We'll be getting into it. David Brown, good to see you. Glad you're here. Nick Musser, what's up? You're at work listening to us. That's good. Well, hopefully work is not too unbearable. Big J, Sex Machine. That makes two of us. Joe James is here. Vash Starwin. Nate is here. Little Justin Chris. How Easy's in the house. Nice. Mohammed. And George Morris is here with $5. Thank you, dude. Hey, Greg, how are you doing? Plane Ride from Hell, 0 out of 10. The worst I've seen. Something to wrestle with podcast is getting worse. It's so lazy. I cannot believe that Bruce is still doing that. Conrad has, at last count, 84 podcasts. And how him and Bruce can still pump these episodes out, I have no idea. But, I'm never going to criticize them for becoming, lazy or whatever. I don't even know how Bruce sleeps. How in the world does Bruce have time to take a shit with his job, much less record a podcast on a weekly basis, or in some cases hammer out episodes a bunch? I mean, obviously he's making a lot of money from this, but man, you would think somebody of Bruce's age, this is the time of your life when you start slowing down, not speeding up. So I just hope he can keep up, and I hope that he keeps his mental health in check, because I could just imagine he's under an enormous amount of stress. So if the podcast is lacking a bit, hey, at least they're staying committed to it. When they could have easily said, hey, I ain't going to have no time for this. So I haven't listened to them in quite a while. When I went on a road trip, when I went to SummerSlam to Vegas, we had a couple of episodes on in the car. Other than that, it's been a long time since I've really sat down and listened to them. But I just can't believe it's still going. That's insane. Divine Ricks is here. Good to see you. Domination Warrior, AJ, Jose, and Legend Killer in the house as well. And Spaz ringing in with a $10 super drop. Thanks, dude. Plugs ahoy. I've got reviews for Dynamite and Rampage up, as well as a preview for tonight's Victory Road pay-per-view. Hope to see you guys in the comments. That's right, Victory Road tonight. I forgot to mention that. Cheers and happy Saturday to Greg and the chat. Woo. Luckily, I don't think I'm going head-to-head with Victory Road. That starts in a bit. But that is right. If you're an Impact fan, check them out. David's here. Good to see you, man. Oh, yeah. Tommy Dreamer's ponytail. What was he thinking? The funny thing is he was just probably brought in to be a person who was on the plane to be interviewed. All of his undoing he did himself. Like, they didn't paint him in any sort of bad light. They didn't set him up to be in a position where he was going to look bad, anything like that. Everything that he said, he offered that shit up, which is the most amazing part. You've never seen anybody just incinerate themselves on purpose or whatever, just in crazy. Unbelievable. In crazy. I don't know what that means. Do the podcast drunk, pal. I don't know, Sam. That will be very hard to do. I could try. What's up? Who else do I have? Everybody else I got? Ramon Coffee. I didn't see you yet. And Isaac and John Gorman. Thanks, dude, for the $5. Ric Flair looked really bad in this. I knew Flair did stuff like this, but the details sound awful. Interested to see the Chris Kanyon piece next week. That isn't going to do Ric Flair any favors either. There's actually been a video clip floating around Twitter in the last day or so of Kanyon on the Howard Stern show when Ric Flair called in and just buried him to his face. Ric Flair was like Kanyon's idol. Ric Flair was the reason Kanyon got in the business, and admired and respected Ric Flair, and then he calls in and shits on him. Yeah, there's a lot of things that Flair has done that is fucking horrible. So I think a lot of the stuff might start coming out now. I mean, maybe some women in the past that had a run-in or an encounter or interaction with Ric Flair come forward now and just start, and the snowball just, or the floodgates open, I should say, like a Bill Cosby situation, although I don't think Ric Flair ever drugged women. Honestly, I don't think Ric Flair had to, but Ric Flair really felt that he was entitled enough to just go around to women and show his dong to everyone, or his hammer, as Tommy Dreamer called it, and that was perfectly acceptable, and there would be no repercussions ever. Now maybe it's looking like there is. This has really blown the lid off of a few things here, so we'll see what happens. And you're right, John. I think the Kanyon stuff is going to be tough to watch. Really tough to watch. Deshaun's here. Thanks, dude, for the $2. Do you think AEW will delay Flair's debut / plans? Yeah. I don't think they're going to bring him in, to be honest. I just don't, unless this is something that's able to blow over. They might just tell Rick, hey, I know we had plans. Hopefully they have not signed him officially. But if they had plans to bring him in, hopefully they're saying, hey, we got to wait and see, if things kind of blow over and you're able to still be Ric Flair, then we'll talk. But it's probably not something they're going to want to touch. They're in a tough spot, too. They were all set up to bring him in. I wanted to see him there and interact with Tully, interact with Arn Anderson, interact with Sting on TNT. I thought that would just be amazing, for the inner fan in me and my nostalgia craving and all of that. But now I am not touching Ric Flair. If I'm AEW, I'm not only delaying it, I'm not bringing him in at all. So we'll see what they do. They're not us. But if I'm them, I'm not bringing him in. You can't. It's going to get so much fucking heat. Zelius Ward, thank you, dude, for the $5. Ruby Soho Britt Baker promo was the highlight of the week for me. It was dope. I did like it. There was a couple parts of it I didn't totally like, but I like some of the lines that was dropped. Britt Baker pointing out how many times she's changed her name and not being a runaway but being fired, and Ruby saying that she's entitled, who's banging a dude in the back. All that was fun. But I almost thought like the promo could have even been better. That's weird. I don't know why I thought I got that impression from the promo watching. I thought it was good, but I'm like, they could have even, I thought, gone a little bit further, but I thought it was very good for what is going to be a pretty short-lived feud. Ruby is not going to beat Britt Baker for the title. There's no way. So the fact that they can kind of put this little match together quick enough, get a promo out of it, a little scrap, a little brawl, set up something potentially for the future, but immediately Britt is going to keep the title. I thought it was all pretty good. Last night was a good little hour rampage. It wasn't bad at all. I'm loving these hour shows, man. So much easier to stomach, tolerate, and handle. Anyway, let me shout out these patrons real quick, and then we are out of here. Then we are going to jump into the plane ride from hell. Got a couple of new patrons this week in Jordan Hendricker and Colin Delaney. Divine Ricks is back. Ryan Y, I believe that is. JJ, Nikita, Chris Miner, Super Fluffy Toaster, Deshaun Robinson, J Smooth 99, Martin Can, Apron Bump Podcast, Alex Dredge, Alan Carter, Brandon Yelverton, Nick Musser, Jimmy Anderson, K, Dogs Kennel, Ryan Y, Devlin Husband, John Redifer, Claudio Clavidetzger, Daniel Rodriguez, Barry MK, 400, Josiah Blevins, Scott Moss, Domanian, Ewell, John Riffle, Michael Kumo, Naveed, Keith Salyers, Blake Moran. Always dudes. Thank you so much for your support and all that stuff. Y'all are the best. Thank you again. Let's get into it, guys. Plane ride from hell. I've been keeping you guys waiting long enough. One more thing, though, before we get into the plane ride from hell. Do me a gracious favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Tap it. Click that notifications bell. If you're in this chat and you've never been here before, please subscribe, because I'm here every Monday night for Raw reviews, every Wednesday night for AEW Dynamite watch-alongs, every Saturday for this Winged Eagle podcast, and most Sundays either for a pay-per-view review or a fun watch-along or a retro review, or occasionally I take them off and watch some foosball and have a couple of cold Greg Weisers. It just depends. So please subscribe. I'm up here all the time. Shoot me a follow over on Twitter, all my socials, and the BS is down in the description below, along with tomorrow and Monday's live stream links. Let's shut up. Talk about the plane ride from hell. The Vice Channel resumed its third season on Thursday night with the Plane Ride from Hell episode, one that was on the schedule when we first saw the listing back a few months ago, when this was the one I was eyeballing in terms of the one that I thought was going to be the most overall interesting, because that was right in my time period of wrestling. Although 2002, I felt like I was kind of in the downswing. I was still very, very much into the product, and it's a time period that I remember really, really well. And as I talked about earlier, being a former shoot interview junkie, something that I had to go to rehab for several times to get over, I was just watching every shoot interview I possibly could. It didn't matter who it was, talk about anything. So the amount of times that the plane ride from hell came up in various interviews was quite frequent, and a lot of guys had a lot of things to say about it. And we've heard some of the classic stories, the JBL getting busted open from his stitches by... I believe Michael Hayes. Michael Hayes got his ponytail cut off by X-Pac. There's been other stories that weren't mentioned here, like Michael Hayes almost taking a piss on Linda McMahon, which almost blew my mind. The big wrestling match that took place in the aisleway between Kurt Hennig and Brock Lesnar, and they went into the emergency door and all that shit, and all of the hijinks and shenanigans that was going on this flight. I heard so many different stories. It was always such a, like this crazy urban legend of all these things. And I'm like, I wonder if all these things really did happen. And the more people you talk to, a lot of them had similar stories. You heard Scott Hall being wheeled out in a wheelchair from several people. And I'm like, this all sounds legit. This was a wild ride, man. So here in the episode, in the Dark Side of the Ring episode, they elaborated even further and even explained why maybe these guys got so fucked up. Some of these details I wasn't really aware of, but was definitely aware of the free-flowing alcohol and the GHB and the halcyons, I think they are, that deals with insomnia and helps people sleep. All these guys just got fucked up out of their minds, and just it was Mardi Gras in a tube of death above the Atlantic Ocean at 35,000 feet with helpless flight attendants there charged with the task of serving these drunken animals. And I can't even imagine what it was like. I mean, the stories I've always wanted to like put myself, I'm like, oh, I wish I could be in the plane. And the funny, just to see this shit for myself. And I always found the stories to be more, number one, fucked up, but more on the lighthearted side. All of the different stories we had heard in the past about this flight didn't really get into that there was actual sexual assault. We heard some fucked up stuff, Ric Flair with his dong out and Dustin drunkenly singing to Terry, all those things we had heard before, and but never really, anything too bad. Although I think it was on the 30 for 30 that ESPN did on Ric Flair, they almost had like an animated reenactment of a plane ride with Flair naked with his robe on, pinning a flight attendant up against the galley. And the funny thing is, that might not even have been the plane ride from hell. The point of that was this was a normal thing that Ric Flair did. And poor Heidi Doyle is probably only one of dozens of flight attendants he has pinned naked up against the galley. Not to rape them or anything like that, but just to feel that he has the right to do that to them to that degree. Think about how many there are. Holy shit. So a lot of the stories we had heard before, but never kind of the darker side of it. And I always wondered, how bad it really got. We've always heard that Vince McMahon was on the plane. A lot of people didn't know that. They hit that with us at the end of this documentary that Vince was there. But I was always under the assumption that Vince was there. I thought that he was. The funny thing about Vince is that even back then, I don't even know if he would have cared to this degree. Vince has his fun too. Have you heard the stories of Vince ribbing people when they go to overseas to do like the Tribute to the Troops show? He just gets on that flying fucking warehouse that all those guys have to fly over there in, and he just fucks with everybody. He's like a kid in a candy store, messing with everyone. And I think he kind of likes that. Bret Hart, oh, my nose is itching. Bret Hart has told famous stories of Vince, wrote in about it in his book and talked about it in the Hall of Fame, how Vince would come into the strip club drunk and he took the LOD's finish and shit. So I think Vince is down to have some fun, and Vince understands that boys will be boys, and even though they're in a separate part of the plane, maybe they weren't quite aware of how gnarly it was getting back there. Now, whenever I've heard stories of the plane ride from hell, in my head I always envision like a regular commercial airliner. I'm picturing rows of seats in my head. Like when you are told stories and you have no video of that story, you have to make up what it looks like in your head. So in my head, I'm just thinking that this is a big commercial airliner that they've chartered. But there's still normal rows. There's like a first class, and then there's coach rows, and everybody's just piled into those seats. No, this is like a nice chartered plane that sports teams use, basketball teams and football teams use to travel from town to town. These things are luxurious. They are spacious, humongous chairs, tons of leg room, tons of room to move around, and world-class food. These guys got fed very well. I'm thinking it's just some commercial flight, and they're all just packed into these chairs going a little bit stir-crazy. They got room to move. They can move around, do cartwheels, and have wrestling matches like we saw with Kurt Hennig and Brock Lesnar. I'm just thinking that wrestling match took place like in the emergency exit row, and that's when they hit the door. In my head, that's kind of what I was envisioning whenever I've heard these stories. So to find out that this is like, a super nice chartered jet, that's usually made for sports teams and stuff, these guys were flying in style with a lot of room to move and a loaded alcohol cart. And many people were interviewed for this, including pretty much the star of the show, Heidi Doyle. She was the one that offered up probably the most incriminating details on a lot of these people, and you can tell that she's, just somebody that's just trying to live her life. She's not She doesn't come off as dishonest or shady in any way. She seems educated. She seems rational, and she even said herself, she goes, I don't want to get like over dramatic about stuff, but this happened and this happened. She was even very careful how she kind of explained stuff, not trying to be too almost like attention seeking. She's not looking for support or sympathy or to be over dramatic or anything like that, just telling the story of what happened. And I thought she did a really good job of doing that. So she was the star of this thing. Some of the wrestling personalities and people that were on the flight, Jim Ross, who did not look like he wanted to be there, Rob Van Dam, Tommy Dreamer, our friend with the double ponytail, Terry Runnels, Justin Credible, Mike Chioda, and maybe a few others. Those are the ones I kind of have written down here. They were all interviewed for this. And basically, Heidi goes on to say that this jet kind of had, the executives and management up front, just like it would be for a sports team, and all of the talent and shit in the back. Both areas of the plane very nice, but both areas of the plane kind of separated. So you have to think with Vince there, he's got to know something, and why he didn't go up there and rip that curtain open and be like, all y'all motherfuckers are fired if you don't straighten up right now. He might have had to play dad. But then again, maybe that's not something Vince really does. That's Jim Ross's job. And they tried to get into a lot of that here, and who was in charge and whose responsibility was it to keep these grown adults in check and shit like that. So it was kind of getting wild right from the start. So basically the biggest problem that they had, according to the episode, was that the flight, which I also have never heard before, maybe I did and I forgot, the flight apparently was delayed for 7 hours. Now, because it was a charter flight, they just chilled out on the tarmac because there was a bunch of room in the plane. It was stocked with food and booze. There was no reason to go back, so they just kind of hung out there on the tarmac until the weather cleared up all the way in Connecticut and they could start heading across the Atlantic Ocean. Well, during that time, they started drinking their balls off to the point where they went through a liquor cart and had to order 2 more. Heidi says she's never seen a liquor cart have to be replenished once, much less twice. So there's a lot of alcohol being downed here. So we wind up hearing some of the stories we've already heard, some of the less crazy ones, but still very crazy. The Bradshaw Michael Hayes incident, which was detailed by X-Pac in one of those kayfabe commentary shoot interviews, talked about where JBL had gotten some stitches, I think, against X-Pac in the match. They were overseas. They were in London, I think, or whatever it was, for the Insurrection pay-per-view. And they were over there for the tour. So this was the last stop or whatever, and he got a little bit of color on that show and had fresh stitches. Well, Michael Hayes comes up to him and just, with his knuckles, just punches him right in the forehead, opening up his stitches. So they kind of told that on the documentary. Now, X-Pac describes it as Hayes punching Bradshaw, opening up his stitches, and then Bradshaw knocking Michael Hayes out. And that's why he was unconscious when X-Pac went to cut his hair off later on. But what it appears to have happened, and what they kind of mentioned here in the documentary anyway, is that Hayes was basically roofied or drugged, or somebody dropped a little Halcyon in his drink. Rob Van Dam kind of discussed this, although he was discussing it with women, and he's discussing it very casually. Now, Rob Van Dam obviously wasn't doing any of this, and he was kind of disgusted by the whole thing, but the way he was casually talking about it as if it was something that was so incredibly common. And he said they would go looking around for people to drop these things in their drink, and then as soon as they were slurring their speech or couldn't walk, that's when they jumped on them and took advantage. And he talked about that as if it was just as normal as going to McDonald's and ordering some fries and a Coke. Just completely, totally normal, everyday thing that goes on. Why in the world are you even worried about it? Unreal. So apparently they also do it to each other as ribs, and they like to drug each other. So it's not good to drug anyone, same sex or opposite sex, at all. You should never drug anyone. Well, apparently somebody dropped one of these things into Michael Hayes' drink, and that's why he was so fucked up. X-Pac was the one in that interview that told the story about Michael Hayes almost pissing on Linda McMahon because he thought he was at the toilet. They didn't mention that in the documentary, but that's one story that X-Pac tells. So I was always under the assumption that Hayes, because Hayes has a reputation of partying as well, that he just partied like everybody else and got so fucked up that he didn't know where he was. But he's so valuable and a big asset to them behind the scenes in terms of what he does there, it seems like he's gotten pass after pass after pass. He's been suspended a couple times, even once for some like racial shit. So Hayes is no saint either, but I was under the impression he just got fucked up. It sounded like he might have been drugged, according to Dark Side of the Ring. So they tell that story about Bradshaw and, getting opened up into stitches. And then they tell the story about X-Pac cutting off Michael Hayes' ponytail. And it was funny in the episode, I think it was Jim Ross, that almost makes it sound like X-Pac was doing this in order to be accepted as a main eventer. They even referred to him as a tag-along or a trailer hitch or something like that. I forgot what they referred to him as in the episode, but I'm like, damn, that's kind of harsh. X-Pac's great. Yes, X-Pac had his problems and his demons as well, but in terms of in the ring, X-Pac's always been a very, very well-respected measuring stick, of the 90s and the early 2000s there. So why they would depict him like that, I don't know. But X-Pac kind of tells his version in the shoot interview, and it kind of fits with what they told here, how he whacked off the ponytail and held it up like he won the title and the whole plane cheers. And then he pinned it on the board at TV the next day, which Jim Ross confirmed in the Dark Side of the Ring episode as well. And he was pretty pissed because you got to remember, all these guys had to do Raw the next day after all this shit went down on the plane. I could not go to work TV with a hangover that massive. I don't know how these guys party like that, man. I don't know. So anyway, we get some of those stories out of the way, some of the less offensive ones. Brock Lesnar and Curt Hennig, of course, have the big wrestling match on the plane. We hear about that too. Curt Hennig takes a big handful of shaving cream, smacks it on Brock Lesnar's head, and then they start going at it, and they fall into the emergency door, and that caused a huge issue. Everybody had to kind of break them apart, and that was That was a really big deal, apparently, and it got Curt Hennig fired, when arguably that wasn't as bad as, some of the other stuff that would be going on here. And even Heidi Doyle says that there's no way the door wouldn't have opened. Them going into the door wouldn't have caused any problems, but them going into the regular fuselage could have cracked it and depressurized the plane and fucked everybody up and crashed right into the Atlantic Ocean. There's no emergency landing. There's nowhere to go. You go down, you're dead. That's it. And that's what's scary about flying across the ocean and stuff. So they had probably, I guess, a bigger risk of actually breaking the plane itself than actually opening the door. And that was, I guess, a serious matter. But when you compare it to some of the other stuff, Hennig losing his job was kind of a bummer for that. So once we kind of get all those stories out of the way, that's when they start getting into the Flair stuff. Now, Ric Flair, you got to remember, had only been back in the company for like 6 or 7 months. I was in the building the night he returned after Survivor Series in 2001 when he came back in Charlotte at the end of the show and became co-owners of the WWE with Vince. This was right after that storyline had played out. Austin, Austin was there. Austin hadn't walked out yet. He hadn't walked out yet, I don't think, but he was about to. It was about to happen. So Austin was there. I've heard him mention this before. So Flair had just kind of gotten there and was kind of still in the middle of stuff, and he was still new. So you would think he would kind of be minding his P's and Q's, but no, this is Flair we're talking about, and he just kind of started resuming his Flair way right off the bat, got his ass drunk, started drinking a ton, and that's when he decided to do what he always does, apparently, something that's very regular, and that is strip buck naked and put his robe on and dance around completely nude as a rib for the boys, as a way to entertain the boys. This is a stunt and a performance that he did all the time. Tommy Dreamer even mentioning that he had a hammer on him, as he put it, and Ric Flair likes to show it off and twirl it around. And, and I got to be honest, these are stories that I've all heard as well. I've heard all these. Fans have heard all of these in the past. And we always just thought of it as Rick is number one crazy. Rick is absolutely addicted to partying, and Ric Flair sometimes just gets naked and dances around, and a lot of people accept this about Ric Flair. A lot of people have known this about Ric Flair, but apparently what Ric Flair also does is take it a little bit too far when it comes to the women, and he is very, very forward with women. He's a complete pervert and horny, and he jumps on them a lot. Sometimes they're responsive, sometimes they are not, and that's the problem with Ric Flair. It doesn't matter to him. He's going to approach you whatever, whoever you are, even if you have no interest, even if you're somebody married like Heidi who just had a kid and just wants to go home and be with her new damn family, and here you are with your hammer out right in front of her, telling her to touch it and shit. So they talk about that, and they also mention basically that this is pretty regular behavior for Ric Flair. Like I said, that cartoon depiction of this shit that they did in the 30 for 30 with Ric Flair doing the narration for it, basically admitting that sometimes he will approach flight attendants in galleys and show him his little Space Mountain or whatever the fuck. Like, this is totally acceptable and fine. Maybe back then it was, and that's what I was trying to point out as much as I could for people who were asking me my opinions about this on Twitter. I said, look, if saying that that's the way it was back then is not an excuse at all. It's like, however, that is the way it was back then. What's jaw-dropping to us now and mind-blowing to us now was completely normal. As JR said, par for the course back then. Boys would act like this. Like I said, all those shoot interviews we've heard over the years, some crazy stuff. Here's a good one. Have you guys ever watched I don't know if it's still on YouTube. It used to be. There's another one of those kayfabe commentaries with Perry Saturn. Look up like Perry Saturn Raven stories and some of the shit they describe with putting a dildo on Billy Kidman's head and banging a stripper with it. And so, like, it's unreal. You can't, I was like, this shit should be a movie. And so you wonder how many crazy parties, how many crazy things, and how many sexual assaults straight up have taken place throughout the years. If what happened here on the plane ride from hell was a regular thing, how many planes do you think Ric Flair has been on in his life? Thousands. How many women like this do you think he has encountered? Or maybe been a little bit too forward with, or flashed his junk to, just because he felt like he could, because that's Ric Flair and that type of behavior is totally acceptable or whatever, or at least he thinks it is. How many times do you think this is something that happened? So, that's where you have to, kind of struggle with yourself. And a lot of people have been echoing this all week on social media is don't meet your heroes. And I've been saying that for years. You don't even want to know some of the shit that your favorite wrestlers have done. They could easily do a Dark Side of the Ring on Shawn Michaels. They could do a Dark Side of the Ring on Jerry Lawler. They could do a Dark Side of the Ring on a lot of guys. And drug use, infidelity, and, sexual assault seem to be pretty well documented. Now, my favorite wrestler ever, Bret Hart, who I've read his book a couple of different times. It's a very good book, probably my favorite wrestling book ever. And he's very honest in that. And he's very honest that he cheated on his wife all of the time, and he had girls in different towns. But this was consenting adults. Morally, whether it's right or wrong or not, that's for anyone else to decide. I feel bad for Julie, and I think Bret has remorse and regret in that aspect, and that's why he is so open with it. But even the more gentlemanly wrestlers, like Bret Hart still, has his freaky side. It really makes you appreciate the Mick Foleys and the Bobby Eatons of the world, especially back then. If you're a female in the business, or if you're just a woman in general, being around wrestlers at all, if I'm a woman, I'm sitting next to Mick Foley and Bobby Eaton, because at least I'm safe there. Because everybody else, you just don't know. And I've seen it firsthand. I've been on the road. I watched a wrestler who was in a relationship pick up a girl on the side of the road. Exchange numbers right there in front of me. Not going to say who, but it's stuff like this. It's like, that's their personal life, and they can get wild and stuff, and it's just a matter of like how far you take it. And as long as everything's consensual and everything's happy, then no problem, But when you start forcing yourself on women, when you start feeling entitled enough to actually say, hey, I can just flash my junk to this woman, and this is just an inanimate walking object to me, which, really came to light here, and these people have no feelings, and no, she's never going to carry this around. This is never going to be something that's going to bother her, scar her, or, give her any sort of anxiety or mental issues down the road. Nope. I'm just going to whip this out. Like, no care of that, being so in your own world and so obsessed with your own fame that these are the type of things that you think is completely acceptable to do. I don't feel bad at all if some of this stuff, even decades later, comes back to bite them in the ass. But like I said, you have to wrestle with yourself as well, because these are your heroes. I cried like a little bitch. I cried like a little baby when Ric Flair retired in 2008. And that whole glorious Hall of Fame WrestleMania match with Shawn and send-off on Raw the next night was one of the most just beautiful 3 days of wrestling in modern history in my mind. And it was just such a perfect send-off for what many believed is the greatest professional wrestler of all time. Even back then in 2008, I knew about all of this shit about Ric Flair. But yet I cheered for him anyway. I cried when he left. I was emotional about the whole thing. Why is that? You know, why is that? I bizarrely, for some reason, I don't know why, back in 2000, I think it was like 10, it was when Michael Vick, who did some of the worst things that a human being could ever do, came back into the NFL and had a really good season with the Philadelphia Eagles. And there was something about his season. I was watching him play and stuff, and I'm not condoning anything. As much I love animals, and it just sickens me, you know, to what he did. But I oddly found myself kind of cheering for him a little bit. And I'm like, why am I doing that? This guy should not even turn on the TV when he's on, and I'm kind of hoping he wins. You know, I just had to question myself. I'm like, I don't know why I kind of want him to win. I just kind of do. And it's just, you have a different type of perspective and relationship with people and fame and stuff. And Ric Flair is only the tip of the iceberg. You'd be pretty shocked to know about what some of your favorites have likely done, especially back then when there was no social media, there was no speaking out, there was no Me Too, there was no camera phones, there was no text messages. Imagine if Ric Flair was allowed to text message people in the 1980s. He'd be in jail. He would. So it's like, that's anything in society. You know, think of, police brutality and things like that. All of these incidents that we're catching on camera. Imagine what was going on before we had cameras. Oh, you don't even want to know. That's the sad part about it. I think police brutality, as sick as it sounds to say, is probably the best, or police in general are the best they've ever been. They were actually worse before. They're horrible now. They were worse before, you know? So like the shit that we don't see, the shit that's not on record, the shit that didn't get recorded, those are some of the things that if you were able to find out that information, I'm not sure if you'd have any heroes at all. And that's just the sad part about all of this. So, you know, when it comes to Ric Flair, it doesn't matter how many years have gone by. I saw a lot of people, I'm not going to comment on this. I don't care about what happened 20 years ago. Well, Heidi does, and a lot of other people might as well. You know, Bill Cosby got away with all that shit for years until somebody finally came out and exposed him, caught the attention of the right people, investigation started, and now look at him. Look what happened. You know, so, you know, there's always, there needs to be accountability. You can't just brush it off because it was the way it was, or that's the way it was back then. You know, the business was messed up back then. And if anything, I admire more the people who kept their heads on straight, who didn't get into this type of stuff, who didn't think it was okay for this behavior and just act like mature fucking adults, which wrestling has never really been loaded with those types of people. This goes way back. The 70s and 80s were just as bad. Some of the behavior going on the road, the fights. If you want to Google Kevin Von Erich cat, go ahead. Just read some of those stories and you'd be flabbergasted by some of the shit that you're going to read and that you're going to uncover. So it's up to us to decide, you know, how we continue to view these people in our wrestling memories. If we can continue to admire them, you know, I admire their career, but I don't admire that, how you separate it, how you feel about it. But even though I knew all of these allegations, these stories of Ric Flair, and I wasn't necessarily surprised by anything I heard on Dark Side of the Ring, to hear it is still pretty amazing to hear. I'm like, God, you know, that's unreal. So Ric Flair did not come off well in this. He declined to comment for the documentary, obviously, like you thought he might. And, you know, all of the depictions here of him do not sound very flattering, and none of this stuff ages well at all. And we have somebody like Heidi Doyle who had to carry this around. Now, there was a lawsuit. There was a settlement. Heidi says her husband did not want this story told and to be all over the place in the media and stuff. They took the settlement. That's kind of where some of the issues with Tommy Dreamer came in, and where he kind of started basically like incriminating himself, just torching himself for no reason, when he was really just there to be interviewed. And he began by really kind of defending Ric Flair, mentioning something about Heidi, like, well, she took the money. Why didn't she call the cops? Oh, man. I'm like, okay, that's bad enough. Then he talks about, in this day and age, people are offended by everything. Look at my hairstyle right now. I got 2 ponytails here. There are people that are offended by this ponytail in 2021. Comparing your ponytail to legitimate, documented, proven sexual assault is an unbelievable statement and an unbelievable take, to say the least. He didn't come off well here at all, just the way he all he had to do was just talk a little bit about it, maybe tell a couple of stories, but to kind of go out of his way to act like it's okay and to casually brush off sexual assault like that is a big kind of part of why we are where we are right now and shit. You know what I mean? So that was a real bad look for him. Almost, I don't know. I don't want to say I was laughing about him. Almost like, I was like, dude, you would have been fine if you just shut your mouth. This is a guy with a podcast. He works for Impact Wrestling. Repercussions for him and Flair are already coming in on this, which we'll see, or which we'll talk about in a minute. And, the sexual assault kind of stuff didn't end there either, because we talked about earlier on, Terry Runnels was being interviewed for this. She told the story of Dustin Rhodes singing like a David Allan Coe song. They had been divorced for a couple of years by this point, and he got on the loudspeaker. He took the flight attendant's microphone and started singing to her in a drunken stupor. Obviously, he was hurting. I think Jim Ross was the one that had to kind of get up and stop him. And then Terry Runnels, as she's talking about this, talks about Brock Lesnar. Now, this I had heard about before, but kind of forgot. I have heard about Brock exposing himself. I kind of forgot it was Terry Runnels that he did it to, and she said that he whipped out his pants or whatever. Brock at this time, I think, was 24 or 25 years old. He is coming into an environment of people that are acting like complete buffoons, complete asses, complete animals, and he's kind of just going with the flow, so to speak, and behaving very, very badly. And he exposed himself to Terry. She was told to no sell it, according to her. But the funny thing is I do believe that story, because I've heard that about Brock before. I think Brock learned better of it. I don't think Brock has ever done anything like that or will do anything like that again. And he hasn't done anything like that since. But, when you're 25, you make stupid fucking decisions. Some of the people 10 years older than Brock, 15 years older than Brock, 20 years older than Brock at that time, if not more than Flair, should have known better. And Brock was in a very bad environment there. I'm not defending him either, but that's the type of shit. Dudes just exposing themselves happens all the time in wrestling, and it's just incredible to hear these stories. So that was kind of a slight little mini bombshell there, because I had completely forgotten. I don't remember who told that story initially. It might have been Terry, because I've seen Terry Runnels. I have a Terry Runnels shoot interview. It might have been her that said that. But when she told that on the documentary, I'm like, I have heard that before. I forgot about that. And then Heidi talks about another incident with a wrestler, this time Scott Hall, and that was when he was sitting in a seat and she went over to him and he tried to grab her, and then he grabbed her by the breasts or something like that and was trying to pull her in, and Scott Hall was a complete mess. So with him, there's no telling if he was drugged or if he just got super fucked up, because we all know Scott had serious problems, and he had serious problems when he got brought back in 2002. Being back on the road didn't help any of those problems, and he was basically had to be wheeled out. Justin Credible told the story that when the plane landed, they thought he might be dead because he was just unresponsive and laying there. They finally had to put him in a wheelchair, and they had to wheel him through customs, wheel him past all the boys, wheel him past Jim Ross, who apparently gave a disapproving look to Justin Credible. And he's like, I'm just wheeling him through. I'm trying to look at me. I'm standing up. I have nothing to do with this or whatever. So Scott Hall really embarrassed himself as well, not only doing that to Heidi, but being so fucked up that they actually had to roll him out of there. And Jim Ross, like I said, during the whole interview, he looked very tired. He looked like he didn't want to be there. I love how he does every interview from the beautiful confines of his oceanfront property there, or his oceanfront condo. At least he doesn't have to leave home to do these interviews. But he didn't seem to be thrilled to talk about any of this either, because he probably knows it didn't put him in a very good light either, because he contradicted himself. He said, it's not my job to make sure that grown adults behave themselves, and he kind of has a point there, but at the same time, he's the head of talent relations, which means it is your job. And at the end of the documentary, he goes, I take responsibility. It's my job to keep these guys in line, and I didn't do it. Where before he had said it's kind of not his job. So you would think it wouldn't be his job, but, in reality it is, because, he is the head of talent there, and he should have maybe gone back there and tried to slow that down as best he could, maybe a little bit better. Now, the repercussions from this, of course, Kurt Hennig was fired. Scott Hall was fired. They had said, I think Mike Chioda had said, that the belief was that Hennig could maybe kind of circle back in after everything blows over, but he never got the chance because I believe about a year later, I know he died in 2003 of a cocaine overdose. So Hennig was dead about less than a year after this. And Scott Hall left. Dustin Rhodes, I believe, was suspended and then left later on when his contract expired. And Jim Ross was asked point blank in the documentary, why was Flair not reprimanded and didn't get any punishment whatsoever for what happened? And Jim Ross said that he got a pass because he was a made man and he was Ric Flair, and Ric Flair got a pass. That was really his only answer. You could tell he didn't want to answer the question, but he said it was a good question. Good question, probably because Ric Flair gets a pass, and that's something that we've seen many times. We've seen some people being fired, suspended, fined, whatever, for minor infractions, and we've seen people do some pretty major shit and avoid punishment altogether. It really does matter who you are, and that's a shame, but that's the way wrestling is. And Flair, you would think after only being back in the company for 6 months, that wouldn't fly with them, but it was completely allowed. They even did the settlement thing, knowing all this stuff and knowing what they had on their hands here, and they went on to feature Flair, push him, put him all over TV, send-offs, retirements, ceremonies, championship victories, all that stuff. Flair was a big part of WWE, after the plane ride from hell. So, it was what it was, and we certainly got an earful in this episode, and it was kind of a tough listen, to be honest. Now, in real-life repercussions and backlash from this, CarShield has paused Ric Flair's ad campaign. Of course, he's on all those CarShield insurance commercials or whatever it is. I'm not sure if it's insurance or loans. He's on there with LA Knight is on one of them. So those ads are at least going to be suspended until they do their due diligence, according to them. But if they do any sort of research on this at all, they're probably just going to choose to pull those ads permanently. And Tommy Dreamer has been suspended by Impact Wrestling. I think Tommy Dreamer is on the creative team there. So, I don't know how that's going to affect his relationship with the Knockouts, how he's supposed to enter a women's locker room now and go over storylines and stuff. Like, he's in a tough spot. He's got a podcast, Busted Open. I don't know when that airs, probably Monday. I would think that's probably going to be a pretty interesting episode, assuming he's going to be on there saying his piece, likely apologizing, although I don't trust how an apology from him will sound. He's probably annoyed by this. There's a lot of people, of course, screaming cancel culture. Yeah, that's right. That's the problem here, is cancel culture. Not casual sexual assault, not this entitled attitude that makes men feel that they can do anything to anyone. It's the cancel culture that's the problem. So I kind of worry that he's going to allude to that a little bit in his statement or whatever the fuck he says. We'll see. I've always liked Tommy Dreamer. He's an ECW hardcore original legend and all of that, but he came off very dumb in this, and I don't know how he's going to be able to backpedal from something like this. We'll see. But that was an episode, and I believe the next one is on Canyon, so it's not going to get any better. I'm really hoping after Canyon, I forgot what's on the schedule, but I'm hoping we get something lighthearted, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle Canyons, man. That one's not only bad and frustrating, but it's sad. It's just a sad story and stuff. So you don't want to hear about any of that, especially, right after this, which, my biggest takeaway is, I kind of felt the most for Heidi Doyle and everything she went through. But I thought she came off really well in this, and she told an honest story and, incriminated and brought a lot of things to light, in a lot of ways. So it was something else, man. There you go. Dark Side of the Ring, Plane Ride from Hell. Those are my thoughts. It was nuts. Before we get into the next tidbit of news, we'll talk about NXT and Raw, SmackDown and Rampage. Let me just cruise over here, knock out any super chats that came through. which I think there was a couple, and get reset here, and we'll move on to the next order of business. If you guys could do me a favor and smash that thumbs up button for me, I would appreciate it. Much better audience in here this week than we had last week, so that's awesome. If you're here for the first time, smash that subscribe button. And if you go down to the description, I've got links to the next 2 days of streams down there. Tomorrow's Unforgiven 2001 Watch Along and Monday night's Raw review, which is headlined by a huge tag team match, the Bloodline versus the New Day. That's going to be crazy. We're going to get into that in just a second, by the way, because I want to talk about Raw. I think the new one is the only one I've got here. The new one is the only new Super Chat from the new one. Thanks for the $5. Jim Ross messed me up when he said he didn't know Ric Flair. He didn't know if Ric Flair deserved to get away with his behavior on the plane. Well, yeah, he definitely did not deserve to get away with that behavior, and that's what we talked about. You know, he was given a pass there, and Flair will be Flair isn't always, you know, an excuse. And I'm blown away that it took until Ric Flair's 70-plus years old for people to realize that. And all of the wake of partying destruction that he left in his path, you know, probably cuts pretty deep. And it'll be interesting to see if anything else comes out. Maybe word gets out and there's some flight attendant that back in 1989 was, you know, Flair put his hand up her ass and she's like, you know what, that always bothered me. I didn't say anything, but I never forgot it. And I'm going to go out and tell my story now, you know, so who knows, what's going to happen and how much worse it's going to get, or if it's going to somewhat blow over. Every dumb thing Ric Flair has done always seems to blow over. So we'll see what happens here. I feel for Charlotte, you know, right now who's in a weird position. I feel for Andrade, you know, who when he decked Chavo, who knows, some thought he might be setting up for Flair to come in and take over and be his manager. That's probably out the window now. If I'm AEW, I ain't bringing him in. So we'll see the fallout. We'll see where it leads. We'll see what happens next. But it looks like it's going to be a pretty bumpy second half of Dark Side of the Ring Season 3, to say the least. Some wrestling returns, potentially. We got a new tweet a couple days ago from Bray Wyatt, a.k.a. Wyndham Rotunda, which I hope is the name he uses if he does come into AEW or wherever. A fan asked about his wrestling future, and he tweeted back, quote, "Everything will be clear. I will see you all very soon. Revenge is a confession of pain." So a lot of rumors about AEW. To me, that is the only place for him to go because he's a hell of a talent there. He's going to fit right in. All the best talent available seems to be flocking over there, and hopefully Kevin Steen will be right behind him in a few months. So I really hope we get to see Bray in AEW. Paige might be heading back to the ring. Tweeted out one word, January. That either means her contract is up, or that either means that's when her 90-day is up, or whatever the fuck. But it sounds like that might be the day that she's free to go do something else. If she can get cleared by doctors, she could get back in the ring. There's been a lot of talk about Paige getting back in the ring. Apparently, she wants to get back in the ring. WWE, as we've seen with Daniel Bryan, is very hesitant, and it takes a lot to get them to to get their doctors to clear you. And when Bryan did, it was great, but maybe Paige is just kind of waiting out her contract. And now that it's just about to be up, she's just going to go somewhere else. And I think that's probably the best thing for Paige. Seems like Paige and WWE have been frustrated with each other for a while, and it's probably time for that relationship, I believe, to move on. Plus, Paige loves doing her Twitch and stuff. So Paige, good luck to you. I hope you get the hell out from underneath them and you can just go out and live your life. Rooting for her. So that's really the only other little wrestling news tidbits I have written down to discuss today. Anything else we can talk about tomorrow or Monday because we'll be up here a lot this weekend. I also want to touch briefly on NXT. We talked about it in the Dynamite Watch-Along a little bit on Wednesday night. I did catch most of it. They did a pretty decent rating, 770,000, which is about on par with what they were doing at the height of the Wednesday Night Wars and stuff. So the fact that they were able to bring in that kind of number was okay. The new look stuff, mixed feedback from most people. Some really liked it, some don't. It's this like big colorful beefcake party now, because it's it's changed. They're changing their image. The talent is going to change. These big, kind of muscular meathead type of guys seems to be what they're after now. And they've completely changed up their vibe and their look and the feel of the show. I don't hate it, but again, it's really going to be hard for me to not miss what NXT used to be. And every time I look at this NXT, I'm not going to be able to help feeling sadness for what NXT used to be and what NXT used to give us. And now the way it looks, I'm sure it's going to have its moments, but overall I feel like, NXT 2.0 is a completely new brand. I kind of made the decision once they moved to Tuesdays to kind of sacrifice NXT in terms of my weekly wrestling watching, going to only touch on it in podcasts and stuff because, number one, I'm really not that interested, and number two, I could use an extra day to not fucking have to worry about wrestling. So from now on, I'm only going to eyeball NXT. However, I did catch most of the first episode from Tuesday. I loved the wedding. That was actually really well done, really funny, cool to see some familiar faces like Damian Priest back in the wedding audience for that. Dexter Lumis flashing the axe in his coat was pretty great. And we got I do's and exchanges of rings and a happy ending. Like the wedding actually went off without a hitch, like SummerSlam 91. Even Indy didn't even have to open up a snake in the background. It actually went off. So they got married. They're married now. Index is for real and forever. And I cannot be happier for the two of them. The other big news on NXT was the debut of Bron Breakker. Holy shit. You pay people to come up with these names? You pay American dollars to human beings to come up with a name like Bron fucking Breakker. A goddamn Steiner. This kid is a stud. He's got the voice of Scott and the body of his dad. He's got his dad's 2 pork roast shoulders. He looks like the dog-faced gremlin. He moves like him, and his voice in his promo sounds a lot like Scott Steiner. This kid might have a big future, and you're going to do this to him and give him a name like that? First of all, I thought they were calling him Rex Steiner because his name was Bronson Rick Steiner because that's his real last name, and then I think his character name was going to be Rex Steiner, and then they changed that to Bron Breakker. Why in the world? This is the difference between AEW and WWE. This is some stupid shit that AEW would never do. They might tweak up his name a little bit, but they are going to reference the fuck out of the fact that he's Scott Steiner's son, and they're probably going to bring Scott in a little bit. So for them to give this guy a WWE name so they can trademark it and keep it and all that shit is so ridiculous. Just once, WWE, can you just make a little bit of fucking sense here? Why would you not want to keep that name, and just make him Rex Steiner? I think that sounds awesome. Or whatever the name was, it was better than Bron Breakker. There's 2 Ks in Breakker, I guess, so they can trademark it. I don't know why Bron. I don't know. It's just a terrible name. It is one of the worst names I've ever heard in professional wrestling. I honestly mean that. It's just horrendous. And what makes it even more infuriating when you see this kid, I'm like, holy shit, dumb name or not, that young fella is a Steiner. And he can move and he can talk and he's young and he's probably only going to get better and better and better and better. And you stick him with a name like that, this company, man, this is why I'm not going to be able to really stomach NXT. Another guy, Von Wagner, who's Wayne Bloom's son. Now, Wayne Bloom isn't really quite the status of a Steiner, but a lot of people know who Wayne Bloom is, from Beverly's and the Minnesota Wrecking Crew and all that. But Von Wagner is one of those WWE type of names. They put him in the main event for the title that night, kind of out of nowhere. So they're kind of debuting some newcomers, showing you the new direction. And as we saw in that Fatal 4-Way, that they didn't deliver on the advertised match. LA Knight lost to Bron Breakker earlier on in the night before the match even started. And then, so who got replaced by Von Wagner? I forgot who it even was. Wagner was in the match. I forgot what the fuck happened. Anyway, end of the day, Tommaso Ciampa won the title on Tuesday. He's your new NXT champion. And it looks like, based on that victory, that perhaps Samoa Joe's injury is really legit. A lot of people question the timing, that they were using Joe to get the title off of Karrion Kross, then they're just going to crown a new champion, since he vacated the title right before 2.0 started. But this might actually be legit, because with Tommaso Ciampa winning, that kind of feels like he's going to be the fill-in for what is going to be the torch passing to whoever the next new NXT champion is. Joe was going to do that. Now Ciampa, another guy who's held the title before, they put it on him so he can pass it to whoever they have planned to pass it to. Could be Braun Breaker for all we know, but we'll see. We'll see when the next takeover is or whatever the hell they have planned there. But NXT 2.0 is off and running. It's weird. I'm going to eyeball it. Like I said, I'm very curious about the career and path trajectory of Braun Breaker and where he goes. I want to see what Index is up to every now and then, and very curious who the guy is going to be to take the title off Ciampa and what they do there. So, and how it affects some other stars like Pete Dunne, who apparently is re-signed. Timothy Thatcher is another guy that I just fucking love, and I feel like he's not going to quite fit in to this colorful, kids-looking show. You know, Timothy Thatcher is somebody that I thought could be a modern-day Chris Benoit, could be on the card in that role. And I'm talking about challenging for championships, real championships, like major titles on the main roster and stuff. I always wanted that for him, but it feels like he's miles away from that ever happening. So we'll have to see what his NXT future is. Don't know, but like I said, going to be eyeballing that deal going forward. Monday Night Raw on Monday is set for a pretty big tag match to headline that show. Now, last week, of course, we saw Big E win the WWE title, cashing in the Money in the briefcase on Bobby Lashley. We were all very happy about that moment. Yes, I feel like it was a ratings grab, but as we talked about, every week should be a ratings grab. You should try to put together a good show every week. I'm not a fan of hot-shotting shit. They did this stuff with, you know, virtually no notice, 1 day notice or whatever it was when Big E finally tweeted that and said, I'm going to cash in my briefcase on Raw. And then he told us over and over again, told us 3 or 4 times on Raw. And then out in the main event, he came out and he did it, and he won the WWE title. Great moment for him. Great moment for the New Day. The outpouring of love and support he got from all of his peers and the fans on Twitter and social media was incredibly heartwarming. So good to see that for him. He is one of the most deserving people in the entire company. However, a lot of people feel like they rushed that too fast. A lot of people feel like they should have properly built him for the title and that this was a huge mistake. Now, the Raw rating did not do great. Raw drew a 1.67. I think WWE is going to view that as a disappointment. It was week 1 of Monday Night Football, so WWE had to go head-to-head with that. And they were hoping and assuming, I believe, that the Big E victory would be enough to give them a respectable rating, and they got a much lower one than they wanted. This is not Big E's fault. This is the fault of WWE not producing compelling TV for a very long time now, and they're not going to be able just to decide that morning that they're going to have a good show and get the word out there to enough people to draw a rating. You have to consistently pull in these type of numbers. This week might be better since people are now going to have heard of Big E winning the title, but no matter which way you slice it, if something like that can't bring the rating up against football, I think this is something for WWE to worry about, especially when Dynamite, you know, is pulling in, you know, 1.1s, 1.2, last week 1.3, and Raw is only in 1.6. That, you know, this is probably freaking WWE out a little bit. So for Monday, they have now given us a big 6-man tag team match that could be reserved for a pay-per-view or Survivor Series, but they're giving it to us here. No problem. I got no issue with that. Kenny Omega and Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson could be saved for a pay-per-view, but we're getting it in New York City, which I'm perfectly fine with. So we're getting the Bloodline and the New Day, but the problem is, why is Roman coming to Raw? Last night, Big E was on SmackDown. I think what this is telling us is that this is the problem, and this is the true horror of putting your product on competing networks, because you're going to have to react to these networks getting pissed at you, or USA's mad because Fox has Becky and Brock and Roman and all this shit and they don't get anything. And so they want Roman. Okay, we'll put Roman on Raw. You know, as if your creative isn't a mess enough as it is, you're now going to allow your booking to be dictated by the whims or angers or, you know, statements of the networks telling you that they want this guy or they want that guy. And now it's like they're starting to book based on that. And there's just, you know, how can they do anything long term when they have to worry about this type of shit? We've got the draft coming up in just a couple of weeks, and it makes you wonder, is the draft even necessary? Now you got the WWE champion on SmackDown last night. You got the Universal champion on Raw tomorrow. Are they just going to do away with the brand split? And in order to appease both networks, they're just going to have wrestlers compete on both shows, titles defended on both shows? How is that even going to work with SmackDown Tag Team Champions and Raw Tag Team Champions? You're going to have no choice but to unify some stuff. So this match makes me nervous that it's going to be a sign of things to come. Whenever the networks get pissed or breathe down WWE's neck a little bit, they just say fine and they slap some random match on us, that if built better could do better. And with Big E, the reason I'm defending the decision to put the belt on him is because I don't trust WWE to do what some fans are claiming they wished they would have done: properly build Big E to the title. I don't know how you really build with a briefcase. All you do is come out and tease it every now and then, or just hold the damn thing. The minute you win the briefcase, the build begins. There's no right or wrong way to cash in the briefcase. And yes, what they did with Big E was primarily in part due to ratings, but I still thought it was all well done, except for that commercial break at the very end. I thought the execution of it was pretty good. Big E had me rolling. He had me laughing in that opening statement when Orton and Lashley are face-to-face. He's like, hello? Have you guys not heard what I've been saying all fucking day? I'm getting that title at the end of the night. I don't know what else I have to do to prove it to you. This green thing right here, that belt's coming with me. It's going to happen. So you guys need to stop looking at each other and look at me. I'm cashing this in. They didn't pay attention to him, and he kept saying it. He came out and did it, and I thought it was all really well done, and I was excited to see that, and I was happy. So yes, it was done for ratings, but I was almost happy that they did it because I don't give a shit what they do to make a good moment or a good show. Just fucking do it, and I don't trust them to properly do anything. And down the road, Big E might not be in a position to be in the title picture. It might be best to do it now, give him a short run now, then take the belt off of him, get through your Mania season next year, and then give him another run as a former champion next year. I feel like that could be the direction they're going in, and to build him up and to tease the briefcase in any sort of right way. I don't even really know what the fans mean by that. Yes, WWE did this for ratings, but at the same time, whatever cash in they did for him in the future might have completely sucked. So I'll take what I can get with this company, and I was really kind of happy to see what we saw on Monday Night Raw. So, we'll see what happens on Monday and what type of match this sets up. We're going to talk about SmackDown in a minute, some really head-scratching stuff there. But Roman's coming to Raw, and we're going to see if that's going to begin to be a regular thing or not, or if we have some big pay-per-view match, some Survivor Series match where it's winner-take-all for all the titles. If we can get the tag belts back on the New Day, and the tag belts are on the Usos, and you have Big E and Roman on each side, and you do a big six-man. I don't know. But they're trying to stack names on there. They're trying to get as good a rating as they can because they're going to be head-to-head with football again on Monday. So we'll see how Raw turns out, but pretty good match headlining that. Now, Dynamite drew a $1.175 million, so nearly $1.2 million to Raw's nearly $1.7. They did beat Raw again, second week in a row, in that 18-49 demo that seems to be very important to some people. That's not something I brush off. I don't really care about the ratings and the demos that much, but for AEW to beat Raw twice in a row in that demo, that is not something you can just brush off. Oh, AEW is just a t-shirt company. They'll never achieve anything. They are doing comparable numbers to WWE. Comparable numbers to the Attitude Era? No. Comparable numbers to their immediate competition? Yes, very much so. They're drawing half or better of their rating, and like we discussed last week, if you start a brand new cola company and within 23 months of making your cola, you're drawing half the amount of sales of Coca-Cola, doing pretty good. So I think AEW will continue to roll, and next week is going to be off the hook. So that might mean this might be, NXT moving away from Wednesdays might have been the best thing for this war, because now when AEW does so much better of a job we're going to run down the cards here in just a minute for Rampage and Dynamite next week. They got the whole damn thing planned out. You think WWE would be able to do that? Would they be able to book 4+ matches for Raw on Monday and SmackDown next Friday and actually follow through with them? Fuck no. They don't have that kind of organization. But AEW does. And when you see the cards for both of those shows, what this might do is then really light a fire under WWE to really come through for us on Monday and on Friday. So we've got ourselves set up to have a great Monday, great Wednesday, and 2 back-to-back shows on Friday for Raw, SmackDown, Rampage, and Dynamite. So that's where you have to hope competition really starts showing the fans how much how beneficial it can be when you have one show setting up a big show, New York City, Arthur Ashe Stadium. Holy fuck. The WWE's going to have to counteract that somehow. Otherwise, those ratings might get a little closer. So I think we're likely to see kind of a good Raw on Monday based on that. I think WWE not only has got to react to USA and Fox freaking out that they're paying them $1 billion for a bunch of shit content. Now they're going head-to-head with Monday Night Football, and they have AEW with the most momentum they've ever had. If this doesn't light a fire under Vince, Bruce, and all those monkeys in WWE, nothing is, guys. Nothing is. We'll find out starting on Monday night. Let's talk briefly about last night's SmackDown. Don't want to talk about this whole show because it felt like it was a whole lot of nothing, although they did set a few things up for the future. Now, number one, Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns is official for Crown Jewel. That match is happening, which we knew it was, but doesn't that kind of spoil what you're going to do at Extreme Rules? The Demon is taking on Roman Reigns for the title next Sunday, week from tomorrow. And then you're going to do Roman and Brock for the title at Crown Jewel. So obviously Roman is escaping, right? And he's going to defeat the Demon. That kind of sucks that the Demon's first loss is going to basically be spoiled. Not that they can't swerve us or do something fucking crazy. They could. Hell, I think Brock should show up at Extreme Rules. Roman alluded to that last night on SmackDown that maybe he could. I hope he does in order to preserve the Demon's undefeated record in the WWE. Not NXT, WWE. So I'm hoping we see that. And then Balor can pick up with a rematch after the fact. I'm sure we're going to get an October pay-per-view, right? Or whatever the fuck it is in October ahead of Survivor Series, right? Won't we? So you do Brock interference at Extreme Rules. You do Brock, Roman, Crown Jewel. And then you run back Demon and Roman in October to go into Survivor Series. And there's big questions as to what they're going to do at Survivor Series, if we're going to get that champion versus champion, Raw versus SmackDown thing that we normally get, or if it's going to be a much different looking rosters, because now with Fox and USA, does WWE want to go to Survivor Series and bury one show? What is the network going to think about that? If SmackDown wins 4-5-0 or whatever it was the year I went to SmackDown in 2018, I think it was like a clean sweep or some shit for Raw. So like, what if that happens to SmackDown? Fox is going to be pissed. What if SmackDown squashes Raw? USA is going to be pissed. So WWE probably just doesn't want to have to worry about that. And I would change the format to Survivor Series this year if I was them. So we'll see what they've got planned for the next couple of pay-per-views. Roman, by the way, he opens up the show. The Bloodline is in the ring. They're talking some smack. Big E comes out. Now, fans were immediately on social media like, oh, what the fuck is he doing there? He's the WWE champion. I'm like, just calm down. I even said on Monday night, I'm like, what I would like to see from Big E, since you just kind of jumped without notice from SmackDown to Raw, is him to come back out on SmackDown to kind of have like a farewell speech or something. For two reasons. Number one, it gets your brand new, newly crowned WWE champion out at your next available TV date, to follow up with that big win. But it also gives him a reason to say, hey guys, thank you. It was a great time being here. But as you saw, I cashed in. I'm the new WWE champion. I got to go to the red brand and kick ass over there, but I will be back loving each and every one of you. Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you for everything. Nice applause from the audience. Maybe he beats up a heel or squashes somebody and then he leaves and goes to Raw permanently. So when he came out, that's what I thought he was going to do. But he just came out. He didn't say anything. Although I do have to shout out his amazing ring gear. Very cool. It was some Fuji's inspired gear from their Score album back in like 96 with a New Day in the picture, kind of in the same way the album is. Very, very cool ring gear by Big E. Loved that. He didn't even get a chance to say anything. He's backed up then by Finn Balor, who joins him. We go to commercial. We come back and we've got a tag team titles contender match. These contender matches with Big E and Finn Balor taking on the Usos. Why? Why are you doing this? What is going on? Now, I know they're going to do the match on Monday or whatnot, but I kind of thought Big E coming out once on SmackDown is fine, but now he's in a championship contenders match, and they would win this match, by the way. Combination coup de grace, big ending, in stereo for the win. So does this mean they're going to get a shot at the tag titles? And Big E, he's the WWE champion. So don't just put him on SmackDown and like mid-card tag. I don't even understand why they did this. I wasn't upset with Big E being on the show. I actually thought he kind of should have been on the show. But doing what he did here, no. I didn't think that. I thought it was completely pointless. Didn't understand it at all. So Big E and Balor pick up a big win against the Usos there. And then later on throughout the show, a couple of times, Heyman and Roman Reigns discuss Brock Lesnar. Roman, is still a little bit suspicious as to what Paul Heyman knows and what he doesn't, and Heyman tries to say, hey, Brock is scared of you. And and Roman wants to know if Brock's going to show up at Extreme Rules. And Heyman's like, he's scared of you. And I'm under the assumption that if he's scared of you, he's not going to want to be anywhere around you. And Roman's like, I don't pay you to assume. I pay you to know these things in advance. So he kind of threatens Heyman, like, know what's going to happen. Give me a heads up. If I have to expect this guy showing up there, I want to know about it. And you can tell Heyman's a little bit nervous about this. So later on, he's walking. This is so funny. Heyman's walking backstage, and Kayla jumps out at him. And he's like, and he jumps back all scared. And Paul Heyman and Kayla have got a really cute relationship. I really like it. It's kind of similar to Tony Schiavone and Britt Baker. They're hilarious together. And Kayla, here, she mentions something kind of interesting. She mentions the possibility of Brock going to Raw in the draft, which is weird because Brock was a Raw guy. Didn't he lose to Drew McIntyre? When he came back at SummerSlam, he was just decided to be on SmackDown. So why is he going to get drafted to a show that he never really... I don't understand how this works. But anyway, you can tell that WWE is trying to ease the anxiety of these networks by letting them know, you might get Brock. Brock might go to Raw. Chill out, USA. We're going to send Brock to Raw. And they're making little hints here and teases that guys could be moving around in the draft. So we will see. They probably will do that if Brock and Roman have some sort of a match at Crown Jewel and we don't get a finish or a definitive winner there and Roman hangs on to the title. By the time we get to Crown Jewel, Brock is going to be on another brand anyway if they do move him to Raw. So that match will be a Raw versus SmackDown match if Brock gets moved. So we'll see, how that goes down. But Kayla bringing that up to Heyman, kind of made him a little bit uncomfortable, and I love the two of them together. We had Rick Boogs squashing Bobby Roode in a really shitty match. Boogs and Nakamura were then attacked by Commander Aziz and Apollo Crews after the match. Baron Corbin versus Kevin Owens was supposed to happen, but Corbin attacked Owens during the entrances and kicked his ass, and the match didn't happen, so we'll probably get that next week. Seth Rollins cut a hell of a promo here, dressed like a baked potato, complete tinfoil fucking suit. He looked ridiculous, and, he told us what we all knew, and that it's our fault what happened to Edge. He blamed us. And that sucks. I didn't mean it, Edge. I didn't mean for you to get injured and get sent home and stretchered out. But apparently we did that to him, and we all owe Edge an apology because Seth wouldn't lie to us. So I've already written my Edge letter. I don't know if you guys have, but if you have time today, get it done by today so you can at least get it in the mail on Monday. And just write Edge a nice apology letter for putting him in that situation and tell him that you love him and to get well soon. And make sure you drop that in the mail on Monday so it gets to him this week. So we can tell him that we're all sorry for putting him in that position. And he also goes on to propose one more dance between the two. Now, this is something that we called prior to SummerSlam. I'm like, this is going to be a program, 3 matches, Edge, Seth, and then the rubber match. Playing out exactly as we had predicted here. Now, this will probably be a Crown Jewel deal unless they put something together last minute for Extreme Rules. I don't think so. Feel like that would be a little bit quick, although if you did Extreme Rules, you could do some gnarly sort of street fight. So I suppose Edge could come back on SmackDown on Friday right before Extreme Rules and say, I'm back and it's me and you at Extreme Rules and rubber match, but I feel like Crown Jewel might be the better place for that. So I think that's where it's going to go down if they haven't already announced something. They might have. I don't know. Also got Sami Zayn defeating Dominic Mysterio, WWE dragging their feet like a motherfucker on Rey Mysterio and Dom splitting up, maybe even having second thoughts about it, I'm not sure. Rey's on commentary trying to cheer on Dom. Dom loses. Rey's dejected and sad for him and whatever. So eventually Dom's going to snap. Knowing WWE, what they're going to do is just split these guys in the draft and never do the split at all. But I think Dom should whip his ass, and he should have done that at SummerSlam at the site of the ladder match custody battle, but he didn't, and now I feel like they're starting to lose the opportunity and their window to do this right. And now if they do it, it's just going to be blah. The Bianca Belair homecoming segment was very nice. I didn't even know. I guess she's from the same county that Kane, Glenn Jacobs, is the mayor of. So she's in the ring. Kane is in the ring with her. He gives her the key to the city, the key to Knox County, which Pat McAfee puts over as being able to unlock any door in the city, this giant oversized key. And she picks it up and celebrates with it. Her hometown crowd is happy. I don't know what they were singing. Was that some sort of a fight song for a local team. I don't know what the hell they were singing, some Tennessee song, and she's got the crowd singing it. Becky then, of course, interrupts. I loved what Becky was wearing. She looked absolutely ridiculous. I'm getting into her kind of as a heel. I don't agree with them doing it, and I wasn't sure if it was really going to work, but you got to at least give Becky credit for doing her damnedest to get the fans to cheer Bianca and to boo her. She's trying really hard, and it's showing, and I think it's working a little bit. So Becky comes out, runs down Bianca a little bit. Bianca, does the girl, you don't even go here thing to her. They start fighting. Becky is able to one-up Bianca, hitting her with, I guess she calls her rock bottom, the manhandle slam. Is that what she calls it? Hits Bianca with that, leaves her laying, and they've got a big showdown coming up at Extreme Rules. I really hope Bianca Belair wins the title back at Extreme Rules, but I also think you could maybe have Bianca Belair win the title back, but not at Extreme Rules. Maybe another match after that, maybe Crown Jewel. I don't know. They're weird about having women in the ring at all, much less having a championship match over there. I don't know if they do that, but I think I could even stand holding off Bianca just a tad bit longer. But then again, if you do that, I don't know where it would be. October, pay-per-view, maybe Survivor Series, I don't know. But I want Bianca to beat Becky, but I'm actually okay if it doesn't happen at Extreme Rules, as long as it happens. But I can go a little longer on these two. I want to continue to get used to Becky being this asshole heel champion for a little while longer. I think that'll make her loss even that much more significant because Becky, you got to remember, really hasn't been defeated in over 2 years. So I just feel like Extreme Rules is kind of not a throwaway, but just kind of a random match. It's not the stage I'm beating Becky on, so I could be wrong. Who knows? Plus it is, it's probably going to be, is there any stip in this thing? I forgot. I think it's just a regular match, but they could get a little crazy in there. We could do some sort of a weird finish where Becky retains, but Bianca definitely has got a rematch coming to her. We'll see. We will see. Overall, not a horrible episode of SmackDown. The Roman Reigns stuff is always good. The Big E being there was extremely head-scratching, and that championship contenders match made no goddamn sense at all. Rollins, promo, love him, love his suits. He's one of my favorite people on television right now. And the Bianca stuff was nice. But overall, SmackDown was largely skippable last night. Rampage was a good little fucking loaded hour there. Great tag team opener between the Lucha Brothers and Butcher and the Blade. That was fun. We talked about the Britt Baker and Ruby Soho segment earlier on. A lot of cool lines dropped there with Britt Baker talking about Ruby Soho. How many times have you changed your name in the last year? Well, just one. But in the last few years, maybe a couple, from Heidi Lovelace to Riot to Soho and all of that. And she goes on to tell Ruby that she's not a runaway, that she got fired. And Ruby agrees, you know what, you're right. But when I look at you, I look at what I see in so many other women I come across, and or broad. I think she called her a broad. So many broads I come across. You're entitled and something, and you're banging some dude in the back. So that got a big pop out of the crowd. They wind up brawling. Ruby runs off Britt Baker, grabs the title, holds it up in the air. Ruby ain't going to be holding that title. That's as close as she's going to get to it for right now. But a good little segment there. Good stuff on the mic. I think Ruby will continue to get better. She did have a little bit of WWE vibes in her promo a little bit that I picked up on. I think that will phase out as a lot of this talent is given the freedom they're given on the mic and stuff. They'll maybe come out of any shells that they have, but I still thought overall really good segment, fun segment, little digs, little shit we like to hear. We like to hear about the backstage stuff. We like to hear little even casual indirect references of WWE. Those can all be really fun. They gave all of that to us here and set up their title match at Arthur Ashe on Wednesday very well, because, when you do that Casino Battle Royale and you do this match so quickly, you only have a short little window to kind of get people to really want to see it. And I thought they accomplished that here for a short little program, a week-long, 2-week-long program that this is going to be. I thought it was great, and it set up and laid groundwork for something that they could potentially do down the road and revisit back to this match, when the time comes. So that was great. I'm looking forward to Britt and Ruby on Wednesday, and I think the fans and the audience there are going to be looking forward to that one too. The main event saw Miro defeating poor Fuego del Sol. Boy, Fuego del Sol and Tommy Dreamer just getting their mouths are just getting them into trouble. Fuego del Sol back on Dynamite decides to put his brand new car, I guess he bought like a new Camry or some car. I don't know. I couldn't even tell what it was. He's going to put his car on the line if Miro puts his TNT title on the line one more time. So that was our main event last night. Miro taking on Fuego del Sol. Of course, Fuego's got no chance of winning here. Miro, although Fuego did have a little bit of offense and frustrated Miro a tad, in the end, of course, Miro beats him, annihilates him, pins him, wins the car, grabs the keys to the car after the match, shoves him in Fuego's mouth, and then puts him in the game over with the keys in his mouth and just tortures poor Fuego as a brand new proud owner of a Toyota Camry or whatever car that was. Sammy Guevara comes out to make the save to his best friend, Fuego del Sol. Interesting to hear Chris Jericho on commentary during this whole thing. It's Sammy. Sammy's here to save the day. Sammy runs out, does just like Ruby does, picks up the TNT title, basically signifying that I think he's going to be Miro's next challenger for the title. That's great. That's going to be a fun match. That's going to be a really fun match. Keep Miro rolling. These are the right types of opponents to give to him. Have him beat and break Sammy Guevara in half. Even though we love Sammy on this channel, I want to keep Miro rolling. He's one of my favorite people. Two of my sleeper favorites right now in both companies are Miro and Seth Rollins. I'm just enjoying the shit out of their work. And I think Miro even more so because he's done such a, 180 from coming in off WWE and all the goofy shit they were doing with him and then into AEW. Didn't really find his footing at first. I didn't really like a lot of the stuff he was doing at first with the video games and the cheesy shit. And I'm like, it's not for me. Hopefully Miro will find his way. Well, holy shit, has he found his way. And I am loving everything that he does and really looking forward to Sammy Guevara and Miro for the TNT title. They won't have time to throw that together for Wednesday, I don't think, but that could be a full gear type of thing as well. So we'll see. Looking forward to that one. Like I said, big week of wrestling in AEW next week. 2 huge 2-hour shows from Arthur Ashe Stadium starting on Wednesday with Dynamite, and then they are going to film and tape, I believe, Rampage right after that with a bunch of matches there. So listen to this lineup, and I hope you're sitting down. On Wednesday, we get MJF versus Brian Pillman Jr. That thing is finally going to be blown off. That is going to be fun. They've done a good job of building that little issue, and that's another thing I want to compliment AEW on, is when they have short little programs, they do a good job with them. Like we're getting with Ruby and Britt, and here with MJF and Pillman. It's not going to be a long 3 pay-per-view long ordeal. It's just short and sweet, and it's really well done. The MJF and Pillman stuff has been really entertaining. MJF crossing some lines with the family and stuff. That should be a really interesting match on Wednesday. We're also getting FTR versus Sting and Darby Allin in a tag team match. Like we mentioned earlier, we're getting Britt Baker defending the AEW women's title against Ruby Riott. We're also getting Cody Rhodes versus Malachi Black. Cody made his return in his big bright red suit on Wednesday. That match comes up. The rematch, the return between these two is this Wednesday, and I am praying that Cody does not win, but Cody wins in these situations. He puts guys over, but he always beats them back. So hopefully this will be the exception to that rule. I am not ready at all to see Malachi Black take an L yet. We'll see. Also, we have a CM Punk promo where he will be talking about his in-ring match on Friday against Will Hobbs. And in the main event of Dynamite on Wednesday night, we get Kenny fucking Omega versus Bryan fucking Danielson. Holy shit. That's mwah. A lot of fans say, or some fans say anyway, why does WWE get criticism for giving us Big E winning the title so quick to pull a rating, and AEW doesn't get that same criticism? Well, number one, AEW is trying to give this New York City crowd a huge show. They don't have a pay-per-view every month. Theirs are a little bit more infrequent, and they set up their television shows to be as big as pay-per-views in a lot of situations. So putting Omega and Danielson now, I actually agree with the decision because I don't believe it's a title match, and it gives them a reason to do it without having to have Bryan Danielson kind of go through the ranks type of thing, and then you can kind of revisit it down the line. I think it's a way to give the fans a really big dream match. This is something you can't wait 2 years on. Danielson's, doesn't have a ton of time to wrestle, so get these out while you can, and I don't believe this is necessarily a ratings grab. We were going to get a huge match for this Arthur Ashe show the minute that was announced months ago. When they said September 22nd, Dynamite's going to be in New York City, you knew the main event was going to be a big deal, possibly even a title change, as we were predicting Kenny Omega versus Hangman Page. So Omega versus Danielson, I ain't complaining. I don't care how you do that match, when or how short of notice you give, but they still gave a hell of a lot more notice than Big E. What did Big E tweet out that morning that he was going to do it? This is a match that's basically been set in stone from the minute Danielson showed up at All Out. So they at least have done a couple of weeks of build here. It's not like it's that quick. And the fact that we're getting that match on Dynamite, it's a dream match. It's a dream match we're getting on free TV. And that is great. That is so great. And you can still do the title drop with Omega down the line. Don't know who's going to win between Omega and Danielson. Big elite presence there, of course. So we don't know if Danielson's going to get some backup or whatnot. I don't know. I think CM Punk is going to be working the undercard Team Taz stuff, at least for now, so I don't know if he could make an appearance. It doesn't look likely, though. Either way, we're getting Omega versus Danielson on Wednesday, and that's a win. Rampage looks just as good. This is going to be a late-night Friday show that's going to be 2 hours instead of 1, and listen to these matches. We've got Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page taking on Chris Jericho and Jake Hager. Dan Lambert's going to be backing up Sky and Page, I'm sure. We get Adam Cole making his in-ring AEW debut, teaming up with the Bucks to take on Christian and Jurassic Express. So we get Danielson's debut on Dynamite and Cole's in-ring debut on Rampage. Very cool. We also get CM Punk's in-ring debut in AEW, that on AEW TV anyway, and his is going to come on Rampage against Powerhouse Hobbs. That's going to be a really interesting match. I mean, Punk is going to get the victory here, but I think I'd put him in the ring with Starks before Hobbs. We'll see. Although Punk is so quirky, he's the exact type of guy that'll fucking take a loss here. Starks can run out, cost Punk the match, gives Powerhouse a huge win, and then Punk and Starks can have a match, and Punk can beat him, and then maybe follow up and beat Hobbs in a rematch or something down the line. But either way, it gives Powerhouse Hobbs a really big win in his column, although that seems unlikely. Punk is probably going to get the victory here, but nothing is for sure with Punk. And there's nothing for sure really with AEW's booking either, because they'll do anything. We're also getting Anna Jay versus Penelope Ford on Friday. The Lucha Brothers teaming up with Santana and Ortiz to take on Private Party and the Butcher and the Blade in a big 8-man tag. That's going to be fun. I'm really hoping that Proud and Powerful are next in line for those tag team titles. Maybe they'll start setting up something there with the Lucha Brothers on Friday if we get any sort of like miscommunication between the two teams. Keep a lookout for that. And what is probably going to be, well, I don't know what the main event is going to be. I don't think this is going to be the main event. The Cole and Bucks match probably will, or CM Punk's match will. But we're also getting Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston taking on Minoru Suzuki and Lance Archer in a lights-out match. That's all for Friday. So that's 6 matches for Friday. And we've got, I believe, 5 for Wednesday. That's 11 pretty solid matches there. Out of those 11, I'd say 9 are top-level matches and pay-per-view quality matches. And we're getting those in the same week for free in front of a jam-packed house in Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York City. I am jealous of that audience. If you're going to be there, shoot us some tweets, shoot us some screenshots, give me updates if you're there. Let me know how you're enjoying yourself and how fun the show is, because I am a jealous wrestling fan for anybody who's going to be in the house for those 2 shows. And like I said, if WWE can elevate their game a bit as well and give us good Raw and SmackDown shows, next week's going to be really fun for the wrestling fan in all of us. I cannot wait. But it is about time for me to sign off. I got to go to work still. This is my Friday night. I have Sunday and Monday off. I'm very excited for that. So I'll be up here to hang out with you guys both nights, tomorrow for Unforgiven 2001 and Monday for the Raw review. Let me see any super chats that I need to knock out before I get out of here, and I will be leaving. And by the way, thank you for everybody that's been engaging in the chat and everything. Sorry I didn't have a chance to read through all of these. It was a jam-packed episode, and we were kind of on a time schedule today. So I apologize for that. I know I got to get some supers. There's one from Stone Cold 10X. Good to see you, man. Thanks for the $2. Sorry I'm late. What'd I miss? Well, you got to scroll back and find that out. I talked about the plane ride from hell for a good portion of this episode and how crazy all that stuff was. And we talked Raw, we talked NXT, we talked SmackDown, Rampage, AEW. We've talked everything Stone Cold. You're going to have to rewatch this. And I will have time before I leave to push this out to the podcast feed. So the download will be available on my website, goodmicworkcommentariescomp1938.com, and you can find it on your Spotifys, your Stitchers, your iTunes, your iHeartRadios, or wherever podcasts are sold. check me out. There's another one, right? Domination Warrior. Good to see you, man. Thank you for the $5. Great content as usual. I got to ask, where would you debut a pay-per-view event? Madison Square Garden, Tokyo Dome, Sky Dome, or Wembley? Also, you look like John Locke from Lost. Who the hell's John Locke? I don't know who that is. I never watched Lost, so I don't know who John Locke... Oh, is he the bald dude? Oh, I can't even see who that is. Some other guy. Anyway, where would I debut a pay-per-view event? Probably for me, MSG. MSG's the Mecca, man. MSG's where everything used to take place. That's a WWE event anyway. Of those other buildings, Wembley's only really famous for SummerSlam. Skydome's had a couple of Manias, and of course, I'd probably go MSG or Tokyo, one of those. So if it's WWE event or something with, maybe WWE ties, affiliation, or anybody who has any sort of New York City or MSG history at all, I do MSG. Any other, any promotion or something? I don't know. Skydome. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, Danielson and Omega, I'd love to see a Broadway. And the funny thing is, I'd have no problem with that. Although when it's a 2-hour show, it's going to be hard to do that. If they start at the bottom of the hour and just do a 30-minute time limit deal, I'd be perfectly fine with that. However, because whatever you do there, you're going to want to run that back down in the future. And is Danielson really going to start out 0-1 in AEW? He might. So we will see. But I have a feeling that, there's going to be a lot of elite stuff, a lot of run-ins, lots of extracurriculars, and a lot of other faces around ringside during that match. We'll see how it goes. Either way, Danielson and Omega in the ring together. Ooh, gives me fucking chills. I cannot wait. You guys have a great rest of your Saturday, and I hope you have a good night as well. Make sure, like I said, you're joining us tomorrow and Monday. We're going to be up here all weekend long doing a lot of streaming and heading into what is going to be a really fun and big week in wrestling next week. You guys take care. Enjoy Victory Road if you watch it. Enjoy football if you're watching that. And I'll catch you tomorrow for Unforgiven 2001. Y'all be good. Peace.
This has been a Good Mic Work Commentaries production. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/goodmicwork. Follow Greg Morgan on Twitter at goodmicwork and visit goodmicworkcommentaries.com for all the latest podcast and video content.